I-10, the super highway that is going to connect California with Florida, has run into a delay. Members of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service are currently asking the courts to consider the endangered cranes that live.
This trial. I certainly hope we can come to some sort of agreement for the sake of those birds. So, Fran, how's the birthday party?
Not good, Dad. People kept saying, "So you're the girl whose dad is stopping Interstate 10 from going through. Why can't you just be done with this?"
You know how important this is, Fran. You've been with me to the march to Mississippi. You've even held a baby crane. These birds are being pushed out of their habitat. What Pines Banners are very rare. Now the Department of Transportation wants to build a highway right through it.
It's just a street, Dad. Couldn't the cranes live on either side of it?
When people build a highway, they also build on and off ramps, rest stops, and develop all along the highway for places for travelers to stop. I'm not sure the cranes can handle that. They're in danger. There are only 35 of this particular species of sandhill cranes left in the entire world. Once they're gone, they're gone.
What makes these cranes so special anyway? Why do we need to save them?
One of my professors in college, Aldo Leopold, did a lot to bring back habitat that humans had ruined. He realized that we humans were the reason that different species of animals were becoming extinct. I agree that the cranes deserve better than the pockets of land that we've left them. Sometimes I feel like I'm fighting a battle worse than my time in New Guinea.
Was that where you were in World War II, Dad?
Yes, for some of it.
Why was that hard?
Everything about war was hard, but this one day in New Guinea, we came under surprise attack from the Japanese. There were a lot of wounded soldiers in my division who couldn't swim. In order to get them to safety, we need to get them across the river with a rope. This other soldier and I kept taking the rope back to the other side of the river where the wounded were so we could get them across to safety. Ironically, we'd been using that rope to play around in earlier. Now we had to use it to save ourselves. We were pretty scared.
Hey, I'll bet that's sort of how the cranes feel. You know, having a good time until someone comes along and makes it dangerous for them.
You're right. They probably do feel like they're under attack. Well, guess I better get going with the court.
Good luck, Dad.
Thanks.
We are here to discuss the building of I-10 and the Mississippi Sandhill Crane's endangerment. Mr. Valentine, thank you for joining us as an expert on the crane. Mr. Golton, representative of the Fish and Wildlife Service, please proceed.
Do you think that the proposed path of Interstate 10 will have an effect on the crane?
It will put them in jeopardy by destroying their habitat, which is vital to the crane.
Do you think the crane can survive with less habitat than it already has?
It is doubtful.
What about residential and commercial development? Do you think the crane can withstand the pressure from housing and businesses without Interstate 10 going through?
No.
If you were able to acquire land for a crane refuge, as you planned, and the road did not go through, do you think the crane could withstand the pressure of normal development in that area?
It might. There's a visual impact the cranes are not used to. Startled by large equipment, people, and vibrations more than noise would probably cause them to desert nesting or feeding habitats.
Mr. Ward, representing the Department of Transportation, please proceed with your cross-examination.
Why is it important for this space to be protected for the Mississippi Sandhill Crane?
The space is needed to allow for normal growth, movement, and territorial behavior.
What would the noise cause the birds to do?
They would avoid the area affected by the highway.
Can you say, as an expert, that there has been any substantial change
in the amount of birds in existence since 1963?
Only by reference. I recall seeing birds flying to their roosts. At the time, I hadn't made any concerted efforts to locate the nests. It has taken me 12 years to learn what I think are most of the crane territories. These territories are lost, partially due to private and commercial development within the area.
What is it that you recommend, Mr. Valentine?
We recommend that the highway acquires some specific land on the east boundary of the refuge to cause the least amount of disturbance for the cranes.
Have you walked over that entire area to determine if there are any nests in that area?
No, ma'am. I've not walked it. I've perused innumerable maps. I have flown over it. I have driven over it. My method is to look at a map and determine what might be suitable habitat and drive to it and walk it out. I've done that on everything that looks like suitable habitat within the area I described earlier.
This Cranes versus Lanes trial was the first test of the Endangered Species Act, which is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. If there had not been suitable habitat near I-10, the courts would have halted the road. Instead, Mr. Valentine was able to find suitable habitat that would allow the cranes to survive and thrive nearby. This was considered a major victory for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the cranes.
Mr. Valentine's testimony has been credited with the reason why so many animal wildlife refuges are protected today under the Endangered Species Act. According to Mark Madison, U.S. Fish and Wildlife historian, the settlement of this case allowed the Wildlife Service to create the Mississippi Sandhill Crane Refuge and provide the first 2,000 acres. This land has been increased tenfold since the 1970s. This testimony has been the most historic part of the Endangered Species Act, which has become much more powerful since the trial.
After the court case, Mr. Valentine continued advocating for the cranes, speaking as an expert all around the world. He continued to volunteer at the refuge many years after his retirement up until a year before his death in 2001. His example of defending the environment is one we should all aspire to.